Thank you all, and welcome to the ARA PACIS for the presentation of the Eupost-lab project. Thank you. Well, as anticipated, the project was led by CNCE and as research partner, as research coordinator by Fondazione Brodolini, but it was possible mainly because of the work made at national level by a strong network of partners involving mainly unions, employers' organization, paritari organization, sectoral funds, and research center from 8 countries. So we have, again, just also to thank them for their work, the Trade Union of Construction Workers, Budowlani from Poland, and FCTP from Belgium, the employers' organization, BCC from Bulgaria, the NGO Latina from Romania, the research center CSU affiliated to the Lisbon University from Portugal, and Notus from Spain, and the sector fund Socabau from Germany. I want to stress just the key objectives of the projects that were to support administrative cooperation and information sharing primarily between paritari and social funds of the construction sector, but also between the wider range of monitoring and enforcement bodies like labor inspectorate and social security institutions across Europe. The key on paritari and social fund, the key focus on paritari and social funds was also because there were already linkages and data sharing in place between some of them, as I already mentioned, especially between Socabau and CNCE. So we wanted also to have this experience as a ground, as a basis to develop it further and to give suggestions to possibly replicate or give some suggestions also to other sectoral funds as well as to enforcement bodies and monitoring bodies. Here we come to the second objective, to the second key objective of the project, that was to deploy knowledge on how administrative data can actually help and in turn be helped to be supported from field inspections. And we've done this through 3 research phases. First phase concerning a preliminary research on which administrative database, which relevant administrative database were available in the covered countries, and which was the wage structure in each country, which are the compulsory elements of wage. As we will see, we have focused only on some of them that are particularly important, and how much this is enforced, which gaps are there, which loopholes, if the minimum wage is actually applied to workers, domestic and posted workers or not. In order to check more specifically the conditions, the working condition of posted workers, thanks to our national partners, we implemented a web survey that actually became also a field survey, because in some cases we had to reach out construction workers or to phone workers in order to get information, because web was not the main channel for them. So we had also to depart a bit from the initial methodology. Finally, through qualitative interviews to enforcement bodies and to social partners, we refined our research to get more insights about the working condition of posted workers, how administrative databases are used to enforce working condition and terms of employment of posted workers, as well as of domestic workers, and finally, on the extent to which data are already shared at transnational level. Why we did so? There will be other intervention later that will focus on the directives on posting of workers. I will anticipate here 2 core issues, no? Because when a worker is posted from a foreign country in line with European rules, I will stick to the general rules. Of course, there are some exceptions, some changes, but generally, the workers has to stay attached with the social security of the sending country that is supposed to be the country where he or she normally works and where the company works for pursue real normal activities. When being sent abroad, so he stays attached to the social security of that country, but at the same time is applied a core set of provisions concerning employment rights applicable in the host country, and this includes the minimum rates of pay. This has been just changed, actually, by the new directive that has not been implemented yet at national level because it was it entered into force really like 2 months ago. But theoretically, so there are some aspects that we might link to the sending country, whereas the wage should be generally raised if it comes from a country with a lower wage, raised to the minimum wage applicable in the host country and some other wage elements considered as compulsory, like paid holidays, overtime, for instance. In many cases, there have been lots of research about letterbox companies. So companies that are just formally established in a country, they just set up an office there in order to send workers abroad, and this way paying less social security contribution, while possibly also avoiding to pay minimum rates of pay entailed in the host country. Why does this happen? Because it's not so easy to monitor this situation, because this requires proper transnational cooperation between the authorities of the host country and of the sending country. And as soon as the company is reached and the fraud is detected, the case may be even that the company shut down and open under another legal responsible person, for instance. So those are quite complicated fraud, and this is why there are a number also of elements that are given by the EU directives, which should work as guidelines for monitoring bodies to detect which are letterbox companies and which are the companies that instead pursue a real activity in a country, so are not only formally established in a country, but pursue an activity there, and therefore can post in a legitimate way. I included some of them here, like the size of turnover realized in a country, the number of contracts realized in a country, so if the company has or not clients from that country, or if the company has only clients in the host country. And those are all elements that we try to address. So our focus in this area was to check which administrative database have information useful to take our letterbox companies, where it pays social security contribution, how many offices it have, where are located, and for how long it has been established in that country, and so on. The other key aspects was ensuring the regular payment of wages, so ensuring that the wage, especially when the worker comes from a country that can have low wages, that is not only the case for Central and Eastern Europe coming to Western Europe, but also from workers from Southern Europe coming to North Europe, like from Italy to Belgium, from Italy to Germany, for instance. So in these cases, the wage should be raised to at least to the minimum levels entailed in that country. So a first focus was indeed on the employment status, because if a worker is not hired as an employee, but if he is hired as a self-employed, if he has a self-employed status, he can be sent abroad without having to comply with that term and condition of employment, simply because he's not an employee. So that rules are not applicable to him. But that may be a bogus self-employed, so we have to track this and to get informed about this. The second issue that we have been checking, we have been trying to identify databases having this kind of information, was the payment of wages, basically, because as far as the wage is paid in a bank account that can be still in the sending country, the case may be, again, that in the host country they don't really know which is the wage that is paid to that worker that is posted there, so they don't know if that wage complies or not with the host country legislation. And other kind of aspects that are not strictly related to wage, but they still impact on the wage a worker is entitled to. Two of them I mentioned. One is the working time. There can be cases of bogus part-time, so a worker is declared 20 hours and paid for that 20 hours in line with the host country provision, but actually works in weekend, or he works 40 hours a week. Or a worker is classified with a lower job profile, a lower job occupation, so again, formally everything is okay, but actually he performs a very qualified occupation, and he should be paid more than he actually receives. In order to do so, we implemented a survey, reaching out more than 200 posted construction workers, so we are speaking only about blue-collar workers, operai. Unfortunately, there was not much gender balance, like the 96% almost is made up by men. That's also because that sector is has very few female workers. The survey was implemented in the end, basically, of 2017, from October 2017 to January 2018. And we have a quite good distribution in terms of age, with the average age being 42, the median actually 41, and a normal distribution. So basically, most workers are between 30 and 50 years old. Of course, we didn't want to cover the whole Europe, nor we meant to have a representative picture of what is going on in the covered country, but it was just an exercise to see which probably are the aspects that we should focus more attention on. That we have already some bias because the largest host country is Germany, so 57% of the workers that we interviewed were actually posted to Germany. And in terms of sending country, a very high ratio, so the 32%, even if we have, in this case, a more balanced picture, still the 32% was from one country, that is Bulgaria. This is also thanks to the effort that the Bulgarian and German partners made in this project. Here we have a picture of the flows of posted workers. Germany is almost everywhere in the top of the sending country, and most workers come from Eastern Europe. So basically, we focus on a pattern. We have two patterns in the posting of workers. One is, we can call it cross-border posting of workers, like Italian workers that are going to Austria, French workers that are coming to Italy, Portuguese workers that are coming to Spain. So those are simply trends that are led in a way by the proximity of countries, and other that comes from countries with lower wage to countries with higher wage, which may be impacted by, of course, the skills of the workers, the lack of the workforce in some countries, but also by the wage disparities. As to the length of posting, we know from administrative data that usually they are less than 6 months, but in our survey we had a relevant share of workers that has been posted for more than 24 months. Here, we choose this border, 24 months, because after 24 months, workers are supposed to register to the social security institution of the host country. So there, in terms of social security, at least, there should be the same conditions, even if there can be, again, some exceptions. So this means we managed to reach out a group of workers that is posted for a very long time, probably also because this is easier to reach than shorter postings. The picture of the, again, I told before some cases of non-compliance that have to do mainly with employees. So you can be an employee and be posted. In that case, your minimum wage should be raised to the minimum levels applicable in the host country. Still, there is an area, there are many areas, many factors which could actually hamper this. One of them is the basic case of non-compliance. It is basically that the employer sends you abroad, but the wage remains the same. And this is a clear case of breach of law. But this is not that common among our survey or our interviewees, because it's in the, you see, in the left, paid less than the minimum pay entailed in the host country. It concerns only 12% of our sample. The other case I mentioned before was having, being classified with a lower job classification than the task, the one entailed for the tasks you actually perform, and this is also not that common. The very common one are working above maximum working time. So the maximum working time across Europe is generally, there is some exception for Spain, but generally it's 48 hours. So in this case, we have workers working even more than these 48 hours. In some cases, it's allowed. There are, again, some exceptions, but this is not the rule. And the most alarming one is, the most alarming case is of workers missing the holiday pay. In the construction sector, due also to the temporariness of employment, the fact construction sites may last less than 1 year, we have in many countries sectoral funds, like in Italy, in Germany, compensating for the loss of holiday pay, so intermediating the holiday pay. In other countries, this doesn't happen, but still, in all the current country, workers have the right to receive a pay for their holiday, but this doesn't concern that much posted workers, because it seems, as per our survey, that that's a key problem we should focus on. We also ran inferential analysis. I will not get too much into this. We only found out that the differences are much significant for age. So younger workers are more likely to report breaches of the rules on posting, whereas there are not that significant differences for the educational level, duration of posting, sending, and thus country. This is to be taken very cautiously because, as I told, we didn't have a representative sample. It was just an exercise, and we reached out the companies and the workers that we could reach through our different channels. In France, for instance, we managed to reach workers that were already contacted by unions because they had some key problems with their employers. In other countries, we managed to pass through the employers themselves that were posting. So the picture is, of course, biased by these aspects. I will go to the conclusions of the survey. We have a range between 10% and 35% of workers that report breach depending on the area. So the highest one, as we saw, is the holiday pay. The lowest one is job classification. But this is less or more the range of workers that report breaches. All in all, considering all the breaches together, we have 41% of interviewed workers that did not report any breach. So we can say that they are quite likely to be applied all the conditions concerning posting in a genuine way, in an honest way. There is another 42% of respondents reporting breaches only in one field, and this is quite a high share. And as for my interpretation, this means that generally the different cases of non-compliance don't go together. So either like the employer choose where not to stick to the legislation, either not paying holiday pay, either applying a lower job classification, either not declaring the whole amount of working hours. Another key problem, we saw that in many, now I mentioned here only the share of workers failing to know the standard working time, because we asked them to state which was the standard working time, that in most countries was 40 hours, with some exception for Germany, France. And then we compared their answers with their working time entailed, the standard working time entailed in the host country, and the majority of workers, almost the 60%, were not able to give the correct answer. So there is an issue here of proper information also to workers of their rights. As anticipated, we went further through desk and field research to understand how administrative databases can help to cope with these gaps. First of all, as I said, we had an inquiry of minimum monthly wage of construction workers, because one driver of posting can be indeed the differences in cost, especially if the law are not respected. So if workers continue to receive the wage entailed in the sending country also when post abroad. And we have, I won't hold the minimum wage. In some cases, it's a simulation, so it's not that precise, because we had hours wage and we made the simulation on a standard month. But we have wages that depart from the lowest value that was from Bulgaria. It's about 261 euros to the highest one in Belgium. And we have a ratio of 9:1. So a worker normally employed in Belgium, as for the minimum wage, gains 9 times more than a Bulgarian worker. Of course, those are driven by differences also in the living standards in the different countries, but there's more there. Because if we instead compare the poverty line, that as for the European Union is set conventionally at 60% of the median wage, so you take the rank basically of a country, the rank departing from who earn less, going up to who earn more, and you get the median wage, so it's the 50%, then you get the 60% of that. So you are in the bottom, in the left side, in the area of those that are earning less. If you compare these values, you have that the ratio between the highest one and the lowest one is only 4:1. So we take that as a driver also for wages. We see that the differences could be much lower, so there may be still much room for convergence across Europe. And on the top of minimum wages, actually you have a set of other compulsory wage elements that are not applicable in all the countries. Apart from holiday pay, we didn't include all the wage elements. There are also indemnity for night work, for dangerous work, and so on. We only stick the 14-month pay in some countries. We only stick to those more common and more interesting. So if we stick to this one, basically the holiday pay, the 15-month pay, and the bad weather pay, so the indemnity that is given in case of bad weather, so making it impossible to work in a construction site. We have the holiday pay is applicable across the covered countries, even with some differences, because in some cases it's the employer that is supposed to give a pro rata amount to the workers. In some other, this is mediated by a sectoral fund. The 15-month pay is applicable in the countries with the highest wage level, that are Belgium, Germany, France, Italy, and then Spain, and also in Portugal, that instead ranked among those with the lowest wage levels. And the bad weather pay is applicable only in Central Europe, I will say, Germany, Belgium, and then we have France and Italy, even if in the case of Italy, this is not applicable to posted workers, because actually it's an issue of social security in Italy. It's paid by CNCE, but it's a competence of the National Institute of Social Security, the INPS. So again, if we look on the top of minimum rates, we have even higher differences. Other differences, I will not go too much into this aspect, but further differences arises from the gaps in terms of social security contribution rates, taxation tax rates that are also different according to countries, and that generally stays with the sending country legislation, so the country the worker comes from. I move to the qualitative interviews, because we have already addressed some of the gaps that arose from the web survey, from the preliminary research, and that concerns specifically employees, but we have a wider range of gaps that arose from the interviews of gaps, of cases of non-compliance, of frauds concerning the application, concerning the terms and condition of employment. Here we went a bit beyond the case of posted workers, because the idea was that if a fraud is implemented in a country and is specific to a country, when a worker is posted from that country to another one, the inspectors of the other one should know what's going on there, which kind of fraud are implemented there. We have mainly Italians here. A very relevant case for Italy is bogus self-employment. So if a self-employed Italian is going to work abroad, in Belgium, for instance, or in Germany, for instance, and an inspector found him making the same task, performing the same task of an employee, can legitimately ask if that's a genuine self-employed or a bogus self-employed, because he should know that in Italy this is an issue, and so on for other kinds of frauds. This is our map. I won't get too much into the specificity of the countries that are in the reports, but again, we found out the existence of cases of bogus self-employment. Bogus part-time contracts are also quite common, so the case of declaring less workers than the less hours than the one the worker performed, and similar cases like underreported overtime or over-reporting of absences. So the payslip is formally compiled in a precise way, but out of a month, I don't know, of 25 working days, for instance, the worker is reported to be absent 12 working days or 15 working days. So in the end, the wage is lower, even if formally everything is correct. Two particularly difficult areas are those of fully undeclared work. That is less interesting in the case of posting, because for a fully undeclared work, so what we call lavoro nero in Italy, for a fully undeclared worker to go abroad as a posted worker, it means that there is some portable document, some document that the Social Security institution should release, and in that case, it's impossible that the Social Security institution certify that the worker is working in Italy, is regularly working in Italy because, or in the sending country, simply because it's not declared at all. Still, it may be the case that a fake form is produced. Another very difficult kind of fraud is the paying back a share of the wage. So the payslip is formally correct. There are not problems of very low working hours, so we cannot expect the worker to be declared 20 hours and work 40, simply because 40 hours are those that are written in the contract, in the payslip. There are not many absences, yet in the end the workers pay back cash a part of his wage to the employer. This is probably the most tricky to be tackled with administrative data. That's one that we cannot really track unless we have access to the bank accounts, but here we go also in privacy aspect. It's not that such an easy solution. So which database can help us to track this kind of fraud? All these databases are described in the preliminary report. We managed to cover quite well. Okay, it's not a comprehensive overview. I mean, we didn't have the ambition to cover all the databases, yet we managed to have quite a comprehensive view of where data are concerning businesses and workers. And we have a description in the reports about which kind of data can be found there and to what extent they are accessible to users that are not the workers themselves of the organization managing the data. So coming to the conclusion, we try to understand how administrative data are used so far to tackle the identified fraud. And we identified some strengths and some weaknesses. So among the strengths, we had probably the most interesting examples coming from Belgium. There is a systematic cross-checking of different administrative sources, and even they're trying to develop, even if it's not that easy, not that straightforward, but they're trying to use artificial intelligence to discover fraud. So we use artificial intelligence today with Google to have, to get direction, to get suggestion, to get publicity. Probably we can use it also to spot where cases of fraud are. In Belgium, they're trying to take this approach. Another very interesting aspect is the proactive interaction between administrative data and inspection reports. So this kind of work, so getting data themselves work for you, suggest where a case of fraud can be, need a concrete interaction between the results of inspection. In Belgium and in Portugal, this takes place. So in a way, the information filed by inspectors help the database itself to support the work of inspectors, so to understand where cases of fraud are and which cases probably were identified as the database as a possible fraud, but in the end were not at all like this. We had an example from the Italian inspector, no? I mentioned before that the case may be that a company is established in Italy, for instance, but sell all its products, all the invoices are targeted to foreign companies, let's say a German company or another foreign company. The case may be that that's a letterbox company, so it's a case probably that inspectors should carefully monitor. On the other side, the case may be that that company produces some kind of machineries or some kind of works that install abroad. So that's the reason why the invoices target some foreign companies and instead of Italian ones, simply it's exporting the products. So we should be also very, very careful when using this the administrative data. Other experiences are form of joint liability measures, which are relevant especially in the Spanish cases, which pushed companies actually, in order not to have to pay the wage and the social security contribution avoided by their contractors and subcontractors. This kind of mechanism pushed companies to adopt their own databases. So we have private databases that the companies are using to check what their contractors and subcontractors do, how much wages they pay, which are the employment contracts applied to their workers, and so on. Other aspects, a key aspect is the transparency of business data. This is actually there for most of the countries. Business registers are more and more available. And it's interesting, as reported by the Belgian partner, also because the company is somehow accountable, also to people that simply want, like researchers, for instance, that simply want to get a picture of what's going on in a given sector. So they are more careful to what they do. And finally, of course, there is the issue of transnational cooperation. And here we have the good practice, I would say, of cooperation between CNCE and Sogabao that we actually started doing our project and that we tried even to help by developing the prototype database. As to the weaknesses, not always we have an efficient cross-checking between, for instance, social security databases and labor databases on employment contracts, or between databases on taxation and databases on social security, databases on business registers, and again, databases on work. In Belgium, we saw that this works pretty well. In other countries, it's not that common, and it's made, it's quite slowly. And the time lags is the ability to do this control quickly is actually crucial, because many companies, many letterbox companies play on the time, in the meaning that they set up a company and they close that soon after. So when the inspector manages actually to find the fraud, the case may be that this company no longer exists. Other weaknesses is that administrative databases themselves can hardly detect false declaration by companies if not supported by field inspection. And here we come to the third case, that in many cases of transnational cooperation, checks that should occur by social security institution in order to not really authorize, but to declare a posting is lawful, checks that should cover them, should actually check, monitor that the company is pursuing normally activities in that member state that is normally employing workers there, are actually only formal in some cases. So as far as the company is registered, as far as workers are registered, that's given for sure that it's not a letterbox company. And finally, other problems concerns the feed themselves of databases, meaning that there are time lags. If I need to know about a company that was established 1 week ago, I need to have a databases that cover this information. But the case may be that some databases are still not updated, so the same sorry, but all databases are still to 2015, to say, or 2014, so we cannot really give you the information you need. And this also creates room for having loopholes in the enforcement of rules. We also inquired some kind of easy wins, so we don't always need some to recur to artificial intelligence or some very structured software or databases. Probably something is already there. And as for the experience of inspectors and the consideration as researchers we did, there may be some kind of markers of fraud. Again, they do not say a fraud must be there, but there are markers, it can be there. So they probably suggest inspectors that a more careful check should be done on that company or on that case. For instance, as to letterbox company, the case may be that the hiring days of the employees that are posted is very close to the certificate, to the request to the Social Security of the A1 form, that is the certificate that has to prove that the company is normally established there and that the worker is employed normally there. So as far as the worker was employed the day before the request of A1 form, the case may be that something is wrong there. Similarly, and even worse in case the date of establishment of a company is close to the submission of A1 form. One, establish a company and the very day after has a video contract with a client company working abroad. This may be the case, this may reveal a fraud. In the other area we inquired, in the case of payment of wages, other kind of inputs that can be given to the administrative databases to isolate some kind of companies that may apply the wrong wage levels, lower wage levels than they should, are, for instance, to detect, to flag the companies which perform a high share of part-time workers on the head count, Probably they made an agreement so that workers can work less and even receive more pay. Probably that's not the case. So this is a possible marker of a case of bogus part-time contracts. Other cases are the high amount of non-taxable allowances per worker. This is not much related to Italy, but in many countries, they told that this was a key problem. So, for instance, giving a lunch allowance or rent allowance, and as they are not taxed, they were actually being part of the wage that was not declared. Finally, another possible revealer of fraud is...
Finally, stiamo sforando i tempi,
tantissimo,
ma è proprio il doppio, quindi
That's
interessantissimo.
1 minute and I close,
yes.
sorry for this. What can be done to improve administrative databases and their ability to track fraud? 3 key issues we are trying to approach and will be better developed in the final report. Is access to information for employers and for workers, improve the national administrative databases and match them as far as possible, and finally support transnational administrative cooperation, because we saw that many obstacles are still there. So also simply activities creating mutual trust, creating trainings, involving inspectors from different countries can be very useful. And I close here, sorry for being too long.